In this video, we are discussing pricing and revenue models. So that's the answer to the question, how much should customers pay for a product or service? Your book starts off by discussing price discrimination, which is something we see quite a lot these days. Namely, there isn't a single price that's displayed to everybody. That price changes. So depending on who you are, how you're buying, what type of customer you are, how many units you're buying, etc. What quality you're buying, that kind of thing. So price discrimination is all about establishing varying prices depending on various features like the quality of the product or service you're going to get. And a good example of that would be first class or business class versus economy when flying a plane. At the end of the day, the plane gets us from A to B, but maybe with different features and quality aspects, and some people will pay extra to be in business or premium class. The number of units sold can of course determine the price, volume discounts. The channel, are we buying online or in a physical store? And the customer type, that can also change the price. I mean, airlines often charge a different price for customers who want to go somewhere and come back during the same day, because they know, at least historically, these would have typically been business customers who typically are willing to pay a higher price because it's not them paying, it's the company paying. Now, the objective of price discrimination is to attempt to absolutely maximize the profits of the company when clients have a different willingness to pay, and try to capture that different willingness to pay, and sort of force the customers who are willing to pay a higher price to pay that higher price, thereby reducing what we in economics call consumer surplus. Now, some common pricing models which your book talks about, and it's a good idea to at least roughly know what these are all about. First, tiered pricing. Tiered pricing is, in its most basic version, charging different prices to different buyers this could be based on volume, how many units one is buying. Like I said, discounts for those who buy more. So it absolutely is an example of price discrimination. But this differentiation can be done also based on other features. For example, very commonly you'll have a base version of a product or service, or you could decide to buy the base version followed by with some extras. Those extras, by the way, are not always worth the extra price, but some people are just happy to pay the higher price, and that's a very simple way of differentiating. I mean, I was recently purchasing a car, and I got a price for a base version, and then I could upgrade to a higher standard, and I'm not sure if those extras were worth the price I ultimately paid, but I did decide to upgrade to a certain level because I had a budget for that for that amount of money. And that's how a car seller can easily differentiate and discriminate and capture those who have a bit less, a bit more, and get them to pay whatever everybody is willing to pay. So that's tiered pricing. Another one would be dynamic pricing. This is a little bit more complicated because dynamic pricing is typically associated with charging different prices, again, but the prices change depending on time. Different prices at different times. And what's special about different times is, the supply-demand equation. So you may, for example, get electricity to your house cheaper in the night because there is less demand for it from businesses and generally from everybody. Hotels do this. Basically the price you pay for a hotel depends on the season. It's going to be much higher when it's nice and warm and sunny, and much less when it's cold and rainy, although it's the same hotel and the same quality of service, I guess. Ride-hailing apps like Uber or Bolt or Lyft, whatever, use this a lot. The price you'll pay for an Uber drive on the weekend, on a busy Friday or Saturday night, or when there's something happening in your town, like a concert or a sports event, is going to be much higher than what you would pay on a sort of middle of the week ride. I think some concert ticket providers like Live Nation have been experimenting with dynamic pricing recently as well to escalate the prices of tickets for sought after music events. Now, value-based pricing is another one. And this is a bit more sort of, this requires quite a lot of work because you're supposed to set the price, setting the price based on the perceived value that's received by the customer. So let's say I'm a pharmaceutical company. Your book does give the example of pharmaceutical companies here. Now, why should we price the medicine, the medication, based on its cost of production? Rather, let's price it based on the value it gives you, the patient. And this involves estimating the opportunity cost. I mean, what's the cost to you of being ill? And that will, I guess, very much depend on the illness. Different illnesses have different costs associated with them and severity associated with them. So we could do it that way, and that's apparently what pharmaceutical companies do. By no means am I an expert on this. And finally, we've got auction and reverse auction models, where the price that you need to pay is established via some competitive bidding process. So prices established via bidding process. And for sure, if you've ever tried to position a website in Google's search results, or show your ads via some Google system or YouTube for that matter, there is a competitive bidding process there. You set the maximum price and then let those algorithms do the bidding for you against other people who want to advertise or show themselves and their products or services. Now, the next section of this little topic area talks about the pricing models that are applicable or used when trying to sell multiple or complex products. And they talk about, over here, bundling. Bundling is basically combining multiple products or services into one bundle, into one package. Multiple, obviously complementary products, hopefully. Obviously, it doesn't have to be complementary, but it works best when the products are complementary products or services, and getting the client to pay for the whole thing in one transaction. And the classic here is a mobile phone together with a subscription, right? From an operator, a network operator. The next one is the razor, razor blade pricing strategy. And I mean, this is a very classic old strategy that's been around for a long time. Charge a low price on the initial purchase of some equipment, but then charge a relatively high price, or a price involving a high margin, for repeat purchase consumables. And this way of pricing, I think, was first done with respect to razors, where razors are, relatively cheap, but the razor blade doesn't have to be. Okay, not everybody shaves, of course, but think about a printer. A lot of the time, a printer, the actual piece of equipment, is relatively cheap for what it is, but you pay quite a lot for the ink cartridges or the ink that goes into those printers. Another example are games consoles. They themselves are not very expensive, but the game cartridges or the games themselves are going to be quite expensive compared to what they physically represent. Some other examples which are completely not in your book. Think about if you've ever had an espresso machine or something like this, a coffee sort of making machine. That itself is relatively cheap, the machine itself, but the coffee pods or capsules that go into those machines are going to be quite expensive relative to the value of a coffee. That kind of thing. This is the type of pricing strategy we're talking about, and it works well if these consumables cannot be easily replaced by some generic product, because if that's the case, the whole thing loses sense. However, if you can get that model right, like I think Nespresso is doing, well, good for you. Right, next one. Add-on pricing. Right, add-on pricing. So this is where the consumer buys some additional or optional services or products. This could be at the time of purchase of the sort of initial product, or during its use. Now, the key here is to capture the client, or when the consumer is sort of focused on the sale, when they are captive, when they are ready to commit to the purchase, get them to buy something extra. And this happens to me quite a lot. I mean, I'm by no means susceptible to this kind of strategy. I click no whenever this kind of comes up. But I was recently buying a new phone, and as with many electronics purchases that I made online, the store selling it was trying to get me to buy additional services for that phone, like protection for the screen, which I actually bought, or maybe a case for that phone, which I bought. But additional insurance, no, I didn't buy the additional insurance. I didn't think it's worth the price. But, somebody else might have clicked yes and bought that additional insurance as an add-on product. Something else I don't necessarily experience. I'm not a user of this, but if you're playing a game on your phone or on your computer, whatever, you can make in-game purchases. That's during the use of something, when you are captivated, when you're in the experience, immersed in the experience, or when you're using an app, you can make in-app purchases to get some extra features. That's sort of add-on pricing. Right. Another strategy, although this is not associated with selling complex or multiple products, would be penetration pricing. Penetration pricing, and as the name suggests, it's sort of designed to penetrate a market. It's a pricing strategy that's used to very quickly expand. And it will, I guess, involve very competitive pricing, relies on discounting your products or services, making them cheap. It may be a controversial strategy or a risky strategy to employ from a regulatory point of view. If you do it for too long, regulators may accuse you or deem you to be acting unfairly or anti-competitively. So you may run into competition law rules problems if you do it for too long. Right. A few remarks on how digital businesses grow their user base. Grow user base via, and I'm sure there are plenty more strategies than these listed in your book, but your book just talks about two aspects of this, or two examples. Something called freemium business model, or the freemium business model. This is where a certain level of usage is allowed without any extra charge. So some base level may be available to clients who don't have to pay anything. I think from the experience of my kids, at least, there is an app or a product called Duolingo, which allows you to learn a foreign language. I'm not sure how effective it is, but many people use it, and I don't think you have to pay anything to use it at a base level. But sometimes that base may be, it's without charge, but it may be with the need to perhaps watch some ads, and that's the way you pay for it, by watching ads. But you may obviously choose to upgrade to a high level and then start paying some recurring fee. The idea here is to offer that base level without charge and quickly grow your user base if the product is worth something worth talking about. Now, I think this is quite sometimes connected to a hidden revenue model where a service is for free, so users pay no explicit charge because the provider of that service generates revenue in a different way or via a different channel, but revenue is generated, let's say, elsewhere. So, for example, you get free content or the access to free content, but somebody pays for the advertising that you watch. Or with Facebook, you use Facebook for free, but Facebook sells advertising services, right? So people may advertise to you when you're using Facebook. In online marketplaces, often the buyer doesn't have to pay for a transaction, but the seller does. So if you go on eBay, it's the seller who pays for the fact that they've advertised something, and you as a buyer just click buy and pay the price, but you don't incur any additional fee. Okay, and I mean, this section finishes off with some remarks on recurring revenue models. So it's not all about, selling digital products. It's also about sort of more classic things like a subscription model, which has been around for ages, right? People pay on a subscription basis. They get access to something, to product or service. It could be something like software in exchange, or cloud services for a recurring fee. Very, cloud services access these days is very hot, operating on a subscription model. And then you've got the more classic leasing, licensing, or indeed franchising models. These involve some form of property, but property here doesn't just mean real estate, it means generally physical assets. So leasing means for a recurring fee, like a monthly fee, you have access to real estate. You may be leasing property like office property, or some physical asset like a machine, or indeed a vehicle like a car. Those are leased. Licensing applies to intellectual property, which you may obtain under a license. And franchising is when you pay a recurring fee, and in return you have the right to sell or offer a product / service in a specific market, like a country or some kind of geographic area. But you typically also receive marketing support. So think about the way in many countries McDonald's operates under franchise. And there are those who buy the franchise, can open a McDonald's restaurant, and they've got the certainty that nobody else can offer or open a restaurant in a certain vicinity, right, within some radius, and they get a lot of marketing support and product support from McDonald's. In fact, McDonald's tells them how to run the whole operation.